Have you ever wondered what would happen if the stories whispered to you as a child, those meant to frighten you before sleep, turned out to be real? Tales passed down through generations often carry something darker than simple warnings. They travel through towns like shadows, barely spoken out loud, because speaking them gives them strength. They linger in corners, in whispers, in nightmares, and sometimes in places where silence is heavier than air. People swear those tales step out of imagination and into reality. Tonight, you will step into that twilight border. You will walk through villages forgotten by time, places where prayers failed, where children vanished, and where faith itself was ripped apart. These are not stories to comfort. These are wounds disguised as legends. And here begins one of them, the secret of San Bartolo. It began in a forgotten settlement buried in the mountains of Veracruz, a town barely marked on any map, known by its few inhabitants as San Bartolo. The village was small, nothing more than dusty streets, cracked adobe walls, and rusting tin roofs. Days passed in silence, but nights were different. At night, the darkness seemed alive, thick and watchful. The fear had roots. For years, newborns rarely survived their first year. Mothers mourned quietly when they woke to find their infants lifeless, or worse, gone without a trace. Doctors who ventured from the city offered explanations: rare diseases, poor nutrition, parasites in the water. But the elders knew better. They knew it was something older than science, something that returned again and again when the storms arrived. The priests were the first real proof. Father Ignacio, a man of faith and stubborn devotion, was found one morning hanging grotesquely from a magi like a puppet cut loose. His replacement, Father Esteban, lasted a month before he, too, was discovered mutilated in the hills. A third priest, young and strong, resisted 2 weeks before suffering the same fate. No one could explain the horror of those bodies, shredded and displayed as if by a force greater than human. The church remained empty. The bells never rang again. Families locked themselves in at sundown, fastening doors with makeshift crosses, muttering prayers that felt powerless. And when the wind howled, when the sky turned red with stormlight, everyone knew. The witches had come down from the hills. They appeared as floating orbs of fire, drifting above rooftops and fields. Some swore they heard them whisper, calling for infants not yet baptized. They were not fireflies. They were women damned by old pacts, shapeshifters of smoke and flame, condemned to hunt innocents. The arrival of the old woman. Then came an unexpected figure. She appeared one afternoon in the plaza, as though she had always been there. A hunched woman with white hair and pale gray eyes. No one knew where she came from. The villagers began calling her Mother Alondra. She looked fragile, nearly blind, her hands trembling as she held a cane. Yet her presence carried weight. While the rest of the town hid indoors at sunset, the old woman sat calmly on a bench, eyes fixed on the dark hills as if waiting. Children approached her without fear, drawn to her strange warmth. Soon, the orbs of fire seemed hesitant. They circled high above, but no longer dared to sweep close to the plaza. Whispers grew. Was she a saint, sent to protect them? Or was she herself a witch, but an enemy to those who hunted the town? The storm. Night. Ow. One October night, the sky tore itself apart. Thunder cracked like cannon fire. The wind howled with rage, rattling doors, shaking rooftops. Families prayed behind locked windows. Mother Alondra walked alone through the rain toward the abandoned church. Inside, she lit candles and began to chant in a tongue older than memory. The words were not prayers of Christ, they were something older, something primal. The air vibrated with them. 3 orbs of fire descended. Inside the church, they shed their light and revealed themselves. Monstrous women with charred skin, claws sharp as knives, eyes glowing with furnace heat. One laughed, a hollow, echoing sound, as they crept toward the kneeling old woman. And then it happened. Her gray eyes flared golden. Her frail body stretched, bones cracking, skin bristling with dark fur. Her mouth lengthened into a muzzle, and from deep inside came a howl that shook the walls. She transformed into a giant wolf, the guardian spirit the ancients had once called a Nahuala. The witches shrieked and attacked, casting flames, clawing with fury. But the wolf lunged, teeth sinking into flesh not meant for this world. The church shook with battle, cries and growls blending until it sounded like hell itself had opened its doors. When dawn came, the town awoke to silence. On the church steps lay 3 lifeless women, their monstrous forms gone, their bodies pitiful and human. And on the threshold sat Mother Alondra, her eyes once more gray, though a wild light flickered within them. From that day forward, San Bartolo was no longer hunted. Infants lived. Mothers sang again, and no fireballs were ever seen above the hills. The old woman remained until her death, remembered not as human nor beast, but as the one who dared to fight darkness with darkness. The whispering stream of Tabasco. Not all stories end with hope. In a small community of Tabasco called Acayo lived Don Aurelio, a cacao farmer, his wife Teodora, and their children. Ramiro, 15, obedient and serious, and Clara, 13, curious and reckless. Ramiro worked long days with his father, steady and respectful. Clara, however, was restless. Her mother warned her never to wander after dark, but Clara laughed at the warnings. Legends, she thought, were nothing more than bedtime tales. For weeks she slipped out at night, exploring fields under the moon, chasing fireflies, watching frogs leap in the wet grass. Nothing happened, until the night she followed a narrow path deeper into the jungle and found a stream she had only heard of. It was beautiful. Moonlight shimmered on the water. Fireflies danced above like floating stars. Clara lay on a smooth stone, hypnotized by the scene. Then she heard footsteps. Across the stream, a bent old woman shuffled closer. But something was wrong. The fireflies fled from her, frogs fell silent, and even the current seemed to slow. The air thickened. The old woman began to laugh, a laugh so sharp it sliced through Clara's chest. Then, impossibly, she walked across the water as if it were solid ground. When she reached the girl, Clara saw her true form. Her body was covered in greasy black hair. Her eyes glowed like molten gold. Her mouth opened, revealing rows of jagged, uneven teeth. Clara tried to scream, but could not move. Her arms, her legs, even her breath, everything was locked. She was trapped under an invisible weight. The creature leaned close, and in its burning eyes, Clara saw faces. Dozens of them. Children, mouths open in eternal cries, their tiny hands pressing against invisible glass. They were trapped inside those eyes, begging silently for release. The villagers had whispered of her for generations. Aunt Nata, the witch who could kill with a glance, who fed not on flesh but on souls. And now Clara stood before her. The witch extended a bony hand. Just then, a roar thundered from the jungle. Something massive moved between the trees, shaking branches, splitting the night. The witch froze, snarled, and stepped back. The spell broke. Clara stumbled, gasping, and ran with all her strength. She never knew how she made it home. At dawn, she woke in her bed trembling, eyes wide, her voice gone. For weeks, she refused to leave the house, until her death many years later. Clara swore the encounter was real. She insisted that Aunt Nada still roamed the waters, her eyes prisons of innocent souls, and that only some nameless beast of the jungle saved her that night. Epilogue. The darkness between. Stories like these never find their way into official books. They live in whispers, told beside dying fires, when the moonlight casts too many shadows and the night feels too long. They remind us of something uncomfortable. Evil does not always hide in distant lands. Sometimes it wears the face of an old woman. Sometimes it flickers like fire above a field. Sometimes it laughs just beyond your door. And yet, they also remind us that not all guardians wear white. Sometimes protection comes as a beast, a shadow, a force as wild as the threat itself. Were these stories true? Perhaps they grew with time, shaped by fear and memory. But those who tell them never smile, never laugh. Their eyes fix on nothing. Their voices tighten, and their skin breaks into goosebumps. For them, these are not fairy tales. Somewhere between legend and reality lies a thin line, invisible until you cross it. And beyond that line, when silence swallows breath and the night presses close, the monsters are still waiting.